many people have ever seen the show The Big Bang Theory? Most people? Good, makes it easier. The concept of the Big Bang Theory is there's a couple of guys who are really big nerds. They're huge geniuses, right? And this pretty actress girl moves in across the hall, and it's all about their dynamic. But these two roommates, Leonard and Sheldon, often have arguments like roommates do. Where Leonard, there's one where Leonard says to Sheldon, we have to do this. To which Sheldon, a genius, a string theory physicist who graduated college at like 13, replies, well, no, we don't. We have to take in nourishment, expel waste, and inhale enough oxygen to keep ourselves from dying. Everything else is optional. Now I spot a couple of problems with this genius's theory about what we have to do. Do you see them? Okay, well, let me explain. The Earth, which is our planetary home, and it is the home of billions of plants and animals, and requires a delicate balance to keep producing life. And see, just one piece of this, a small part of the symbiotic system that we have, is that green plants, they breathe in carbon dioxide and expel oxygen. And we, mammals, breathe in the oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. It's a need of each other. Or how about this? The bees help pollinate the flowering plants that produce fruits and vegetables and other food sources. These food sources are for us as we eat them directly, and also they feed the cattle and animals that are also subsequent parts of our diet. Additionally, this process also takes place in nature, apart from human need or interference whatsoever. And it feeds much of the natural world's plants and animals just the same. Do you see the problem with what Sheldon has said yet? Not quite. One more. Water from the ocean gets evaporated by the sun, rises into the clouds, and when enough of it's there and the droplets become big enough and heavy enough, it falls to the ground. And this rain is necessary to feed the plants and animals and all of us and sustain all of this life. But, in the right amounts, right? We humans have done things that have caused certain problems in our atmosphere that have changed this balance and left some places too dry and some places too wet, like hurricanes. And if you've ever owned a houseplant, you know the one simple rule: if you don't water it enough, it's going to die. And also, if you water it too much, it's going to die. It requires this delicate balance. Do you see the problem now? The problem with this scientific assessment is purely selfish. If we are all selfish with our own consumption, thinking of only our singular selves, is how we get to the point where we deplete resources and throw off the balance and damage this ecological system of our Earth. If we are selfish with our own consumption and only think about our own selves, then we as a whole are in a little bit of trouble. Our reading for 1 John, this chapter 3 today, we are taken back yet again to this reminder from Jesus of his last commandment: to love one another. And so the very question becomes this: who belongs to that one another that we are supposed to love that Jesus is referring to? Is it just the people in this room? Is it just our friends and family? Or just our community? Is it just Christians? Is it just Americans? Maybe even a little bit broader, is it just humans? And even if we expand it to this idea that it is just humans, This may still fall a little short of the care that is needed to sustain our world. But for argument's sake, you do believe that God is only asking us to love other humans and only care about them and their needs. The same principle applies if we continue to damage our earthly home, we harm other humans as well. Places where there is toxic waste damaging the population, or others' lack of food or water with the thrown-off system, or others having a surge in hurricanes, or other life-threatening phenomena that is caused by the imbalance of our planetary system. Little children, let us love, not in words or speech, but in truth and action. That's what we were reminded this morning. That therefore, we must do more than just take in the nourishment, expel waste, and inhale enough oxygen to keep ourselves from dying. Because it's a little bit more than just about us. We have to think bigger, both in our actions to love as we desire to follow Jesus, and in our theological view of the cross. I'm going to push you guys just a little bit this morning to expand maybe what you've always thought about the cross, about God and God's saving works a little bit. And the first thing is this. Anywhere in our English translations where it says you, that you are saved by this, that you is always plural in Greek. Always. It is never a single individual you. So stay with me as we expand a little bit here. We know everything that we know by our own experiences based on where we were raised, who we were raised by, our ethnicity, our background, our heritage. And currently where we stand in our first world country, in a stable, secure, and safe culture, we are ingrained to look at the world within the United States from an individualist perspective. From a very early age, we are taught to do our best, right? To be the best that we could be, to succeed, to achieve. The I, the singular. That it is for me to worry about myself and for you to worry about yourselves. That we get this ideals within the United States that the individual can thrive. That you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But what if you don't have boots? This also is seen in much of our theology. Remember the way that we view the Bible and then subsequently our view of God, Jesus, and how God saves. Works are through the lens that has been given to us by our common heritage, which is also where our theology comes from. And for we in our first world settings, with most of our ancestors going back to Europe, and so we get the theologians of Europe, of Rome, of Germany, of England, all of which were white men, and had this same privilege of security and stability that we experience, and also cultural domination of being at the top of our human chain. This influences how we have been taught to read the Bible. Have you ever heard the phrase, history is written by the victors? Yeah? See, the problem with this is how many other sides of the story are not being heard. For instance, this thing that we have here, the American dream, the side of the victor says that we came to this new uncharted world, civilized it, cultivated its vast natural resources, and settled a new society where all people are created equal. Another perspective of this same event is that foreigners came and hurt us, invaded our lands, and pushed us away from our homes and our families, giving us diseases that killed most of our population and ultimately displaced us from our homes and pushed us into forced places. It's the same thing. See, the hard truth is that these same ideals that have been ingrained in our society also permeate our theology too. Because the former, the guys that give us, the guys that, came to the United States, gives us most of our historical theological doctrine as well. And this gets translated into much of the first world. And again, I say that because Christians in other places do not share the same views, quite drastically, actually, using the same scriptures, interpret things, which is what doctrine is, our interpretation, much, much differently. Coming from a different background, coming from a place where the cultural indoctrination is very, very differently. And so that this theology, how it is changed, it understands the way it influences the way that we understand salvation. This gift of life renewed that we get from Jesus Christ, that we're still celebrating in this time of Easter. Because we've been taught, and through our individualist society, the theological concept that Jesus died for me, singular. That Jesus died and rose from the grave so that I, just me, by myself, as long as I am a good Christian and do the things that I'm supposed to do, that I am saved. This is the way that we have viewed this. But remember, wherever you see you, it is not singular. Because this view of salvation is a little bit selfish, just like Sheldon's view of life. And it falls short of the true promise that God gives us and the acknowledgement that the I, singular, does not exist in a vacuum. You cannot exist by yourself. Each of us cannot survive without each other and without the ecological systems that are in place in our world. That Christ's redemption of the world isn't so much about the individual sin accounting and the justification of our own personal balance sheets with God, but rather it is a penetrating and acute action of grace and love for the entire world. Like the whole balanced relationships of humans and grass and bees and air and rain. So who is the other that we should love? Everyone and everything in our interconnected life on planet Earth, that we need each other. And just as Jesus reminds us yet again to let us love in action and in truth, as we are called into the world to care for and fulfill Jesus's commandment. Life is far more vast and complicated than just taking in nourishment, expelling waste, and inhaling enough oxygen not to die of our individual life. And so is theology. And so is God's relationship with creation. The whole thing. That our interconnectedness and how Jesus saves this world go together. So let us expand our understanding of God's love from an I to an all, and to try our darndest to love with this truth and action for the sake of the whole world. Amen.